Ladies, on that note, Halloween is a ritual of communicating with the dead and the resurrection of the dead. Can one of you please give us the history of Halloween? What is its origin?
Well, like you had stated before, this is the time of year where parents are going to be rushing to the stores to get their children costumes to get ready to go trick-or-treating, and schools are getting ready for their Halloween parties and things like that. But what most people don't realize is that Halloween and all of his pagan rituals are something that's been worshipped or observed for thousands of years. Dating back to the Celtics, they regarded this time as a festival to honor Samhain, which is the end of summer, where they honored the sun, the dying sun. And they did things such as, they said this was a magical day that preceded the Christians' All Saints' Day, as they said that it was a magical day where the veil between the worlds of the living and the dead was believed to be the thinnest point in the year, making communication with the dead much easier. And this day is also known as, like I said, Samhain's Day, and they also regarded him as Lord of the Dead. And on the eve of this was known that the souls of the dead would come back as a homecoming to walk among the living. And the pagans at this time appeased these spirits by offering food or treats. And the poor of the land would go from house to house begging for these treats so that they could have something to leave to appease these spirits. And thus we have trick-or-treating, you know, going from house to house. Another ritual they had at this time was to dress up as the spirits. They felt like if they were to dress in horror and costumes, that this would, you know, make the spirits pass over their homes, or because they felt like the spirits wouldn't come after one of their own. And then from that, you know, we have, you know, the most popular jack-o'-lantern, where they carved out the jack-o'-lantern. And it said that this came from an old Irish tale of a man named Jack, who I guess was so wicked that neither heaven or hell wanted him. So he put a live coal in a turnip, and he kind of, like it said, that he wanders around, you know, with this jack-o'-lantern. And the pagans, once they came to America, I guess pumpkins were so prevalent here in America that they substituted the turnips for the pumpkins. But people don't realize, with all these rituals that we still have today, that these are pagan rituals that they have been practiced by the Europeans and all the nations for thousands of years.
Sister Yafa, would you like to add to the history of Halloween?
Well, actually, she pretty much covered it. I mean, I can say just in my research and pretty much on the internet, there are different, somewhat different historical points about Halloween, but the one that's most prevalent and most consistent is what Sister Samara has. But also you have to consider on the web, you get perspectives from so many different people. So you have the pagans who have their sites, and they're going to, of course, glorify their days, as opposed to, you know, just the opposite. And there seems to be a war between the fundamentalist Christians and these pagans, you know, and the devil worshippers or the witches and so forth and so on. So, but what is most consistent is what Sister Samara has shared with us.
I wanted to deal, both of you all dealt with the historical point of view, which, like you said, is exactly what is written in the historical point of view. I want to kind of deal with the common sense point of view, and you know, looking at Halloween for what it really is. And I just want to show here, maybe you all can have a close-up on this.
Can we get a close-up on this picture, please?
And basically, this is just giving you an idea. Everyone is very familiar with this, with these images of Halloween. And basically, Halloween is a day that normal people take complete leave of their senses. And I wrote down a couple of issues that they dealt with. First one, they decorate their homes with ghoulish and vulgar, scary arrays, decorated arrays. Secondly, they dress their children up in scary or cute or demonic outfits and send them to school in this fashion, hoping the child will be chosen to be the scariest or the most demonic looking. Thirdly, they buy tons of pure sugar-filled candy, much more than they could possibly consume themselves. 4, they wait by their doors, adorned in bewitching attire, for the bell to ring. They're waiting for strangers to open for them to open the doors and their homes, to small to large, young to old, with faces that they couldn't describe if it was necessary, if these strangers were to actually be culprits, because these strangers are wearing masks. Fifthly, they give candy to these ghoulish strangers, hoping that these strangers will not deface their property. Sixth, these same people send their children out in the night streets filled with strangers lurking and walking around. They send them to knock on strangers' doors to ask or beg for candy, and the same candy that the parents bought plenty of and are giving away. Right. Exact same candy. Right. And they tell their children things like, don't knock on the door of the house on the corner. I don't trust those people. And they feel totally secure because they've warned their children and so forth and so on. Right. So that they feel the children are safe from, so it's okay to knock on the doors of other strangers that they may or may not trust. Right. So, I mean, that's pretty much where I was looking at, with just kind of looking at Halloween as on a common sense type of basis. Because even if someone didn't wish to deal with the historical point of view of Halloween, I think we need to just look at it from, a lot of things are common sense, and we have to deal with it in such a fashion. Dealing with any holiday that is going to be ghoulish and scary and demonic does not make logical sense.
Right. So you just went over the Halloween traditions as trick-or-treating, costumes and masks, bonfires, black cats, bats, jack-o'-lanterns. So those are the same practices that they've been practicing of old that they're still practicing today. So let's go to a scriptural standpoint of it. We have some history of ancient forms of witchcraft that are still practiced today. And can one of you sisters kind of like give us some more information on that, please?
Certainly. Well, to begin with, I think throughout the scriptures you'll find plenty of topics that are going to deal with that. Here's one, and most of them you're going to find in the law. The law is the first 5 books of the Bible. Absolutely. And most of them are just pure law that Yahweh says, do not do this. And here's just a couple. Leviticus 19, it says, do not regard them being people, who have familiar spirits, neither seek after wizards to be defiled by them. I am Yahweh, your Elohim. Simple as that. He says no. Leviticus 20, starting at verse 6. And the soul that turneth after such as have familiar spirits, and after wizards, to go a-whoring after them, I will even set my face against that soul, and I will cut him off from among his people. Sanctify yourselves, or set yourselves apart during these seasons, and so forth. Therefore, and be ye holy, for I am holy. I am Yahweh your Elohim. So I mean, it's a lot of it is repetitive, but repetitive tells us that he wasn't kidding the first time. I mean, he meant it, and he wants to emphasize this information. Here's another. This is a judgment against those who actually, the first few were dealing with, for us not to deal with those people. Right. This is a judgment against those people who actually do this. A man, this is Leviticus 20 and 27. A man also or woman that hath a familiar spirit, or that is a wizard, shall surely be put to death. They shall stone them with stones. Their blood shall be upon them.
Okay. Well, can you give us some examples of communicating with the dead? There's some people that during scriptural time that actually communicate with the dead. Can someone give me some example of that, Sister Yafa?
Well, before I get that, I wanted to also come back on what Sister Jonna said. Okay. You know, they have some people are out there, they're doing so many different things, and now as people, I guess you consider to be more educated or supposed to be have grown spiritually, and you have a lot of Christian churches now who are denouncing this particular holiday and openly saying that they aren't going to deal with it because it is satanic. But what they're doing, and I guess they feel that they have escaped the wrath or will escape the wrath in some way, but what they're doing is saying that they're going to have an alternative to the norm. But what they still do as that alternative is still have a festival at their churches, what they consider a fall festival. Some consider it Holy Night, some consider it Hallelujah Night. But what they're doing is still practicing the traditions. I mean, so they say that, okay, we don't want the children to wear witch costumes or whatever. You know, they come in Cinderella costumes or whatever, but they still doing the bobbing of the apples. But the main point is the Most High did not give us a day to celebrate or to keep holy during this time or on October 31st. So why is there even an alternative to that? You know, and I understand parents want to appease to their children, but what we have to do is teach our children the ways of the Most High, as opposed to just appeasing to them because they want candy, because they want to dress up in a costume. The whole, whatever you want to call it, is surrounded and it's born out of the same pagan tradition or tales or whatever you want to call it, so it's still incorrect. And they will be judged for that.
Absolutely.
But then the other thing, what you said as far as communication with the dead, there's a word, and I might mess this up, so excuse me, but it's called necromancy, and which means communication with the dead. To bring it in more layman's terms, I guess you could say something as simple as the tarot cards, the palm readers, I don't know, the psychic hotlines. We all know what these different things, and I mean, it goes from one age to it spreads out across the spectrum of our people. You know, those we're calling the 800 lines or whatever, trying to find out what's going on in our future. We're reading the horoscopes continuously on a daily basis. We're consulting these books that have, you know, magical things. And then with our children, they have what they consider little harmless games in the toy stores, you know, for them to play and, you know, get fortunes told and things like that. So it's truly permeated our society, but all of that is wickedness. All of that is wickedness.
We also have a lot of movies that come out that deal.
We have a poster over here about some of the movies that are out. Let me move this one. You can go on.
One of the old ones that I was going to bring up was probably a popular one that people are really familiar with, the movie Ghost, where we had a character portrayed by Whoopi Goldberg who was communicating with a dead person and, you know, reuniting him with the love that he had before he had died, and how she was the only one that was able to hear him, and, you know, things of that nature. But Yahweh always let our people know that we were always surrounded by people, nations who partook in these kinds of activities, and he stressed strongly to us not to walk in these kinds of ways. And he told our people in Deuteronomy, the 18th chapter, there shall not be found among you anyone who makes his son or his daughter to pass through the fire, or who uses divination, or an observer of times, or an enchanter, or a witch, or a charmer, or a consulter of familiar spirits, or a wizard, or a necromancer. And he says, for all that do these things are an abomination unto Yahweh, and because of these abominations, Yahweh your Elohim does drive them out from before you. It was like he always made sure that he told the Israelites to keep yourself separate from all of these pagan worships and to serve me only.
And just like you were speaking previously about the 1-800 and the hotlines and everything else like that, these things also, just like has always been said, nothing is new under the sun. And you asked about it in some of the examples. In 1 Samuel chapter 28, you'll read about the story Samuel the prophet had died. And Saul the king he was very far from Yahweh's ways. And it was already mandated that any witches or necromancers or anything of that sort were banished from the kingdom. But he went off looking and searching for someone who could bring Samuel up, because Yahweh didn't want to speak to him anymore. He wouldn't answer him by, through his prayers or anything else, because he wasn't doing as Yahweh's will. So what he did was, he said, he tried to find a way around it. And he did search up this woman in Inco, I believe it was, that was a wizard or a person with familiar spirit, someone who would be the same person you spoke of, who would pull up the dead. So she did just this. She pulled up Samuel and woke him up. Because as we know, when we're dead, we're asleep, waiting on that judgment day for us to be risen, for us to be resurrected. So he was asleep. He asked, "Why did you wake me up?" He was at peace. He was at peace. What is the problem? Exactly. What is the problem? So, and he said, "Well, Yahweh wouldn't talk to me." Would you tell me what to do, and so forth and so on. And he said, for what you've done, today you and your sons will be here with me. Be here with me, sleeping in the ground, in the grave. Exactly. And that's exactly what happened to him. The very next at the at the battle. He was killed. And, you know, for those people who are really interested, and so his judgment happened immediately.
Right.
Because as we already spoke, the judgment was death.
Right.
His death came immediately.
Right.
Exactly. And exactly what happened to him was it. But for those people who are interested in the goriness and everything else, you know, when you read the scriptures, you can read the scripture like a novel. There are so many aspects of the Bible that is amazing.
Right.
So if you're looking for this gory, if you read this story and read what happened to him after he died, the other group took him, beheaded him, took his head around, posted it for everyone to see, took his body, posted it up. So it's pretty gory.
So that's a prime example why you should not go and seek a psychic
You got
or
it.
go to fortune teller or communicate with
Absolutely.
Ouija boards and all these other games that they have out.
But, you know,
Exactly.
another interesting point in that same story is that in the beginning, starting at verse 3, it speaks on Samuel was dead, and then it also says that Saul had put away those that had familiar spirits and the wizards and out of the land. And my point is how fickle we can be.
Right.
And then as soon as he got afraid because the Philistines was going to come in and tear up stuff, you know, and the Most High didn't answer him when and the way that he wanted the Most High to answer him, he goes and looks for a familiar spirit and the wizard that he just cast out of the land. And why? Because that was what he was supposed to do.
Right.
But even today we do the same thing. Our people, they can be in the Christian churches, I would say, or, you know, listening, oh, Yah, Jesus, I mean, not even Yah, I'm sorry, oh, God, Jesus, or whatever, but then they get right home, call a psychic hotline, or they go, you know, and that's why a lot of these palm readers and tarot cards, they aren't even calling themselves palm readers, and they're calling themselves spiritual leaders.
Absolutely. And, you know, people can't allow desperation to move them to that point. You have to wait on Yah. You have to wait on Him.
Exactly.
And if if you're not receiving what you believe at that particular point in time, there very well may be a reason for that. So, and that's a reason why a lot of these people go to those lengths with the desperation and so forth. As a matter of fact, you were speaking on the on movies. And this is a prime example, a children's movie, because Halloween is really dedicated to children. In Space Jam, children's movie Space Jam, in that the basketball players had no idea what had happened to them. They lost all their talents and couldn't figure it out. So they tried every way. They went to the doctors, they went here, they went everywhere else. And then they also tried going to this Ouija type of woman, and they performed a seance. And she, dug up whoever was supposed to be able to give them the answers. But in this, they even bring it to the children. The act of a seance is okay. It's childish and it's okay.
Even that movie Mulan that we discussed earlier, they woke up the dead to find out, can they give them some guidance on what to do with their daughter Mulan, and they sent this little dragon, whatever, to be her counselor to, help her go through this battle. So, communicating with the dead, like you said, they are putting it into the children's movies along with the adult movies. I would like to go to this poster board and kind of like show you some of the movies that they have out now that are dealing with paganistic worship. They have a movie called Bats, Bring Out of the Dead, so that's communicating with the dead. Spirits. We also have like a comic strip that we got out of the news, the Sunday paper, and it really gives you the history of Halloween, how it is a paganistic holiday. Sister Jonna, can you read some of the things that they have on this cartoon?
Sure. In the cartoon, you'll see that it says Americans spend nearly $1 billion on candy every Halloween. And it also gives you a breakdown. It says the roots of this ancient holiday, that being Halloween, are very old and quite the opposite of merry. And it goes on and speaks on the history, and it's spoken what my sisters just spoke on about the Isles of the Celtics and their festival of Samhain, the Lord of the Dead, and then also dealing with the fact that the reason it is at this time of the year is because of the autumn equinox and the sun going away, and then giving homage to the sun and so forth and so on.
So again, sun worshiping.
Exactly, exactly. So it's actually Halloween is a combination of sun worship and worship of the dead. So, but this information they give to everyone.
Everyone.
And this is
on the Sunday paper.
This is
You
for
know.
comics, exactly. This is for children to
Right,
know. So
right.
it's not hidden
It's not
information.
hidden
So when we say
information,
this,
right.
it's not so weird. I mean, it sounds weird,
Right.
but it's out there and it's given freely. So you
Right.
don't even have to go to an encyclopedia.
Right, or
Pick
go
up
on the
news-
website.
Right,
Just
go
pick
to
up
the
the
newspaper.
newspaper, the comics
Exactly,
section.
comics.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely.
And we have some other comics scripts. We have a little boy with this ugly mask, satanic mask, meeting the father at the door, and he's scaring him, and all of a sudden he drops all his groceries or whatever because the sight is so frightening. And they also talk about jack-o'-lantern carving the pumpkin and other satanic worship. So it's just like my sister said, you can go and open your newspaper and find these things. You don't have to go to your encyclopedia or on the website. It's there for everyone to read. Okay, sisters, can you please tell me which of these Halloween traditions that survive the Halloween traditions that we're doing today survive ancient Halloween practice?
Okay. Well, just as we were speaking before, we were talking about the dead, this dealing with the dead. And my sister's spoken before about the fact that this holiday was intertwined with All Hallows Eve, which was a Catholic holiday.
Right.
Now,
And that's All Saints Day, right?
And that was also it was two things, one towards the saints and one towards the, not so much they called it the worship of the dead, but reverence to the dead, which is very similar. This date was moved. It used to be in May, and it was moved to that date in October to be able to combine the two together. Now, what we have to also remember is in May, we still have Memorial Day, which is still giving homage to the dead. And that's what we find. We go through, I've checked out a couple of locations.
Okay. Sister, can you hold that
Certainly.
thought, and we'll get
Certainly.
back to you as soon as we come back with our Round the World report.
Sure.
Greetings, this is Brother Maskell Ben Yisrael with the Around the World News Report. At the top of the news tonight, the United Nations, it has been reported that Israel is very close to securing a seat in the Security Council in the United Nations. Chief Delegate for Israel to the United Nations, Dor Gold, said he has put forth time and effort to eliminate the collective discrimination against the Jewish state in the United Nations system. In 1975, Israel was severely hindered within the United Nations organization when the General Assembly passed a resolution equating Zionism to racism. During the first Clinton administration, Madeleine Albright, then U.S. representative, helped to rescind that past resolution. United States Representative Richard Holbrooke says his first task is to finish the job of bringing Israel the full benefits of United Nations membership. A decision is not likely to be made concerning Israel's seat in the United Nations before next month. In the Holy City, Jerusalem, the safe passage now open. The safe passage will allow most Palestinians with magnetic cards to travel to Israel's West Bank. Since 1993, this has been virtually impossible for Palestinians unless one possessed a work permit. But now, the Israeli-manned special buses will boost confidence in the peace process as well as employment opportunities for overcrowded Gaza residents. The safe passage has been part of peace agreements between the Israelis and the Palestinians since 1995. Then and now, implementation of the safe passage has been plagued with the thoughts of civilian attacks. Israeli Prime Minister Barak says, in a final peace deal, the route will be replaced by an elevated highway so Palestinians can travel between the two areas without entering Israel. And now here's the community update with Ruth. Ruth.
Thanks, Matthew. In Atlanta, a study conducted by Clark Atlanta University finds gains and gaps for blacks in Atlanta for 1999. The study suggests that while blacks in Atlanta are making progress in such areas as economic development, there are still large gaps in health care and transportation. On the eve of the new millennium, Atlanta has achieved many successes, but there still remains many problems, said Bob Holmes, director of Clark Atlanta University's Southern Center for Studies in Public Policy and the author of the report. Until our captivity is up in this country, we will always be the tail and not the head. And moving further to our Census Bureau, the Census Bureau has begun to revise its definition of what constitutes poverty and is looking at a formula that would drop millions more families below the poverty line. The new approach would raise the income for living above poverty to $19,500, up from the original $16,600. A higher threshold would mean that government spending for the benefits for the poor, such as food stamps and Head Start programs, would have to increase. The White House would have to approve a change in the poverty formula, and White House sources report it would take at least another 2 years to do so. In the meantime, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And finally tonight, our Health Watch. The gap between the health of whites and the health of African Americans and other minorities is one of the most intractable problems in public health. Yet more than half of white and black Americans don't know that infant mortality rate is 2.5 times higher among blacks than whites. And almost the same ratios, 57% of whites and 53% of blacks, are not aware that blacks tend to die 6 years sooner than whites do. In addition, the survey found 1 of every 8 blacks and 1 of every 6 Latinos think that medical personnel have treated them disrespectfully. Only 1 in 100 white Americans think the same way. Eat kosher. It could possibly reduce these ratios. I'm Ruth with the Community Update. Back to you, Maskell.
Thanks, Ruth. In Europe, major Christian churches on the decline. This past Sabbath, Europe's Roman Catholic bishops ended meetings after 3 weeks to find out the serious indifference to religion of so many Europeans. With Islam now being the second largest religion practiced in Europe, after ousting Judaism, Reverend Jan Kerkhoff, a priest and professor at the University of Leuven in Belgium, asked this question: how do you evangelize a secularized Europe in pluralistic societies while showing respect for other people's opinions? Good question. Does anyone remember the Crusades during the time of Pope Urban II? Ireland and Italy, 2 traditional Catholic countries, are still showing high church attendance, while Belgium, France, and Germany have reported less than 10% of the young people there report to church regularly. In addition to all the major cities in northwestern Europe reporting less than half the, In addition to all the major cities in northwestern Europe reporting less than half the newborns have been baptized. This prompted the bishops to end their meeting with a call to undertake with great zeal and urgency the task of the new evangelization. Could this be truly a new evangelization? I've read that there is nothing new under the sun. Thank you. This has been Brother Maskell Ben Yisrael with the Around the World News Report and Ruth Israel with the Community Update.
Welcome back to the Signs of the Time show. We are now opening our phone lines to our viewing audience. The phone number is 770-559-2997. You can call or write us at the New Covenant Congregation of Israel, 3901A Covington Highway, Decatur, Georgia, 30032, 404-286-586-69. Our website is www.twr.org. THENCCI.com. Okay, sisters, the last question I asked was, which of these ancient customs has survived the Halloween celebration of today? And Jonna, you had some more examples of the ancient customs that we still celebrate today?
Right. One of the ancient customs is the bonfires. And the bonfires is, it comes from the Druids, and with that whole vigil of Samhain. And the number of ways that they believe that they could see both good and bad omens, omens being the future, and they tried to scare away Samhain and other evil spirits. They build a huge fire. So it would scare away the bad spirits and bring forth the good spirits, because remember the bad spirits were ghouls walking around.
Right.
At this time, they would build oddly shaped baskets and burn alive prisoners of war. So they would have prisoners of war and they'd burn them alive.
Wow.
And
These are bonfires.
these are bonfires, exactly. So they were, so what this is actually called is human sacrifice.
Okay, right.
Okay, so that's also, when you look scripturally, that's called having, just like they said, Yahweh said, none of his people shall have their children pass through the fire. And that's what that is. That's what they're doing, having their children pass through the fire.
Okay.
So they did this with people and also animals. And they believed, by observing the position of the burned bodies after the bonfire is out, that they could see into the future. So they would view this mess afterwards. And the reason it was called bonfire is because it came from bone and fire. So bone, B-O-N, they dropped the E and added it to the fire. So bone, fire, bonfire.
Okay.
And that was one of them. And just like my sister spoke before about the jack-o'-lantern, she spoke on that, the fact that we have an abundance here in America of pumpkins. And over there they use turnips. Over here there wasn't such an abundance of turnips, so they just substituted the pumpkin for the turnip. And then after carving it out, of course, we go ahead and have pumpkin pie at this time of year.
Sister Samara, you had some more to
Right. Another ritual that carried on was the bobbing for apples. You know, history shows us that when the Romans captured the Celtics, they, of course, added their own pagan rituals to the whole festival. And they brought along their goddess, Pomona, who they worshipped. And they always visualized her as sitting on a basket of fruit. And they reared the apple as the most sacred apple in that basket of fruit. So thus we started with the bobbing for apples. And to kind of pick up on where my sister left off with the bonfires is that we remember that this was the time that they thought about the souls of the dead coming back home, you know, to walk the land and things like that. And it's like a homecoming ritual. And, you know, this makes you think about, you know, our high schools at the same time of year have homecoming where they light bonfires. And it's all a part of this whole pagan ritual that's celebrated around the same time of year.
Okay. Sister Yapa, did you have anything that you'd like to add to the ancient customs?
Well, also just witchcraft and sorceries, and I mean, we can even date back to, you know, biblical times. Even there were particular people who were what you consider sorceries and practice witchcrafts. There's a particular story in Acts. Actually, it's Acts 8, picking up around verse 9, but it's speaking of a man named Simon, who was a witchcraft and who had basically lured the people in that town, you know, and they thought him to be some, you know, receiving powers from God and, you know, so forth and so on. So they went to him, and they went to him to use his sorcery and his witchcraft as for whatever purpose. But when Philip came around preaching, and those that decided to baptize, you know, themselves in the name of Yahshua, Simon also did the same thing, but what happened was Simon saw the apostles healing people and, you know, having great powers, but it was through the Messiah and laying their hands on people and healing people. Well, Simon at that point said, oh my goodness, you know, I want that kind of power, you know. Knowing his power wasn't before, he didn't really have any, but he had convinced people that he had, but he wanted that kind of power and thought to purchase that power. And because of that, he suffered greatly. But sorcery, witchcraft, all of those type things have been around for many, many years, and that's why throughout the scripture we can deal, you know, and there's scriptures pertaining to that and what's going to happen to witches, what's going to happen to people who consult witches, you know, and sorcery. So It's definitely something that's forbidden. Definitely.
And one of the judgments for witches is to kill a witch, not to let a witch live.
Exactly.
So that's the judgment
Right.
Yahweh gave towards sorcery and witchcraft and all of those other demonic practices.
Right.
We had talked earlier about fortune telling and the future of the stars, and that deals with astrology. Sister Samira, could you please give us a history of astrology and how it's connected with all these pagan rituals that they practice during Halloween?
Sure. Astrology, first of all, let's get the definition. Astrology is defined as pseudoscience claiming to foretell the future by studying the supposedly influence of the relative positions of the moon, the sun, and the stars. And we know a lot of people you know, can't get up and go about their day without consulting their horoscopes.
Right.
And, you know, these were rituals that were studied for a long time by ancient people like Chaldeans, the Phoenicians, and the Babylonians. Always looked to the stars and the moon to tell, you know, how a person's personality was, you know, what was going to happen to you this day, who you would better be matched with as far as your mate, you know, like you couldn't be with someone who wasn't of your same sign, and things like that. And it also said that, you know, a lot of the kings, like in the Babylonian age, always had their courts filled with astrologers and musicians and things like that, which relates back to Daniel's time and the fact that, you know, King Nebuchadnezzar had consulted Daniel to come to reveal his dream to him because his astrologers and magicians and things like that couldn't do that. So it just shows that, you know, this kind of worship was always going on, even back in biblical days, and it's nothing new. Like my sister said, there's nothing new under the sun.
A chart, astrology chart, the signs and symbols. Can we get the camera to focus on the astrology chart, please?
Okay. If you look at that astrology chart, you'll see at the bottom, it says Pisces or Christian or both. And I hope you're able to see that. And it's the picture of the fish. Now you see here that fish at the bottom is the exact symbol of the Pisces, which is a zodiac sign. Now if you look at the other two fishes, those are the fishes that you see on the back of many cars, and those are the symbol of supposedly Christianity, and it's supposedly supposed to be of Jesus or their Messiah. They look very similar. Now you see that this whole symbolism just goes throughout. And if we go to Deuteronomy, we'll see that Yahweh tells us Yahweh tells us not to deal with any symbols. He tells us that he spoke to us, but he showed no form or comeliness of himself for us to go ahead and worship. And we know that people generally love to have some symbol of what they believe in. The only symbol that Yahweh gave us is an internal symbol of how we are to walk and to act, to think, an entire culture. That is our only symbol that we're to deal with. So you shouldn't see a large symbol of something, whether it be a circle, a square, or orange.
So he gave us the symbol of righteousness.
You got it, absolutely.
I think we have a caller. Caller, do you have a question or comment? Do we still have that caller? Go ahead, caller. Okay, Johnny, will you finish with the chart?
Well, the only other thing about the chart would be the fact that that sun, the picture of the sun, is in the center of it. And that's because the sun and sun worship is at this very center of all worship. Because as we remember, Lucifer was the angel of the sun. And he was that angel. And he is the main one, obviously, against Yahweh and Yahweh's people. So that sun rules all of those signs. That sun rules all of these pagan holidays, all these pagan practices and everything else. And as far as astrology goes, and it's very odd because people will easily assume that astrology must be okay because we hear it on the radio. It says, you know, if you're in a Pisces, for instance, you know, your day will be so-and-so. The same thing, you can't open up many magazines or newspapers without finding your astrology sign. Now here, we go to the scriptures, and this will also tell us that we need to read more, because it's not even any great a definition of terms. So we have to say, well, this means astrology. Here it states astrology. This is in Isaiah 47. And this is verses 12 and 13. Stand now with thine enchantments, and with the multitude of thy sorceries, wherein thou hast labored from thy youth. This is speaking of America.
Right.
If so be thou shalt be able to profit, if so be thou mayest prevail.
Right.
Thou art wearied in the multitude of thy counsels. Let now the astrologers
Right.
and the stargazers, the monthly prognosticators, stand up and save thee from these things which shall come upon thee. Because Yahweh is truly, in following the scriptures, he is going to destroy these lands that are dealing with all these abominations.
Right.
And this was the judgment cast upon America at this particular time for dealing with, and the word right there, astrologers, is there. So they're people who consider themselves Christians and supposedly believe in this book called the Holy Bible. In reading that, I think that's pretty clear.
Right. And didn't Yahweh said he gave them sun and the stars and the moon? to the
Absolutely.
Gentiles to
Yeah, I was just
worship?
about to pick up on where my sister left off, and the fact that Yahweh always separated Israel from the rest of the nations. And he told us in Deuteronomy, at least you lift up your eyes unto heaven, and when you see the sun and the moon and the stars, even all the hosts of heaven should be driven to worship them and serve them, which Yahweh your Elohim has divided unto all nations under the whole heaven.
Okay. I think we have a caller. Caller, do you have a question or a comment? Caller? Do we still have the call? Okay. Well, let's go into modern forms of paganistic worship. All of this Halloween, Christmas, New Year's, whatever, it's really wrapped around economics. You know, it's really all about the dollars. You know, it's all about making money. So, sisters, can we kind of elaborate on how Halloween and all these other pagan holidays, how they really help boost the economy of the nations? But does it really help boost the economy of the so-called Negroes, you know, our people? What does it do for us?
Well, actually, it doesn't do, because we really don't have an economy, you know, within our own people. I mean, we as it is, paying, robbing Peter to pay Paul, as they say, but it's so commercial, and we have brilliant marketers within these companies, you know, that are producing these type things, and what they do is they know to focus on the children, because the children are going to say, Mommy, Daddy, I want, I want. And Mommy and Daddy are going to do what they have to do to make that child happy. And they're going broke. I mean, you know, during Christmas time, during this particular time, they charge, and they really aren't paying for anything. They're just charging things, you know, and then having to later on pay. But that's all it is about, you know, for these companies, is money, because they see that it can be made, and regardless of what position or financial position people are in, they're going to try to make that child happy. And I was just, we had an event the other night, and we had to go into Party City, and I mean, it was jam-packed, you know, and this particular thing isn't until this weekend, but it was jam-packed. The parking lots was full of people in that store, and as soon as you walk in there, you see this big, oh gosh, you know, this horrific costume, and I think it was one of the characters on one of these movies, Halloween or something like that, but everybody's just gleefully in there looking, you know, getting the candy and so forth. So that's, you know, it's money, and so many people have bought into it.
Okay, can you hold that thought? We have a caller. Caller, go ahead with your question, please. We can't hear the caller. Okay, can you focus on this poster, please? The poster shot.
In dealing with what my sister just dealt with, she was speaking on how the parents are trying to appease the children. What we have to remember is it's the parents that teach the children this in the first place. The children wouldn't desire this so much if they weren't taught. And maybe they can get a picture of this. This is a picture I found in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. It's just the home finder section. And it's just a simple thing. It's this person called Linda helps her son Will prepare a pumpkin for Halloween on the front porch of their home. And so it's just a picture of her showing, you know, going through the ritual, showing him how to, in effect, teach his children So this is taught through the ages.
Right.
It's a tradition.
Right.
So, you know, we wouldn't have to worry about the trying to appease of the children if we weren't to promote this to the children in the first place.
And you know, another point is that that's generally the time that parents spend time with their children. You can go up through the whole year and barely spend time with your children when they really need you, but when it surrounds these particular holidays, these pagan holidays, then that's when they want to do things with their children, and they're teaching their children at that time, you know, things that are of no profit.
We have a poster of how expensive Halloween can be. If we can kind of like get a picture. You can go and buy an 8-inch round Dracula cake for $7.99. Pumpkin carving kits for $3.99. And all what I'm trying to point out and say is that this is how it's boosting the economy by these little special activities that go on during the year. Monster candy bags, $5.99. Halloween masks, $2.99. You can get a telephorus of Dracula. You can get a mug of a picture of Dracula with all these flowers and other ungodly things that they're selling, you know, out there. And then the Halloween costumes that they have, you know, out there for the children to buy that are not cheap at all. And on that note, we all have children who are in the school systems. So how do we deal with these things? We're going into the grocery store, we're seeing these items, we're going into the department stores, we're seeing these items, and being that they are in the school systems, you know, how do you deal with your children and on this Halloween holiday?
It's basically just stopping the lie. I mean, it's got to stop somewhere where you just let your child know what thus saith Yahweh. You know, that these are pagan rituals that Yahweh they've commanded that we not partake in. You know, they have the hay rides and all these kinds of things, going to the pumpkin patches and things. The schools are taking the kids on field trips. I mean, even the malls get involved. You know, if you think it's not safe enough for your children to go trick-or-treating, you can take them to the mall and they can trick-or-treat inside the mall.
Okay. We have a caller. Caller, could you state your name and your question, please? Okay, we're having communication problems. Okay, sister, will you finish that?
Yeah, I was just saying that, you know, the malls are even getting involved, and, you know, it's all aimed towards the children, and I think it's just important, you know, for me with my children, it's just stopping the lie, you know, reading them out of the law, what Yahweh says about these kinds of things, you know, taking them out of school when it comes time for their Halloween parties, their Christmas parties and things like that, letting them know that there is a difference between what we do and what other people do who don't know Yahweh, who don't call upon his name.
Sister Jana?
Yeah, and also, particularly for, you know, if you're dealing with younger children, I think it's a prime opportunity when these things come up to prove to your children, because as in time, particularly say with something similar as Christmas, all the other children are told that there's a Santa Claus. Where if from you know from very early you tell your child there's not, and their parents are truly lying to them. Your parents are not lying to you. And a couple of years pass by, and they see, you know, mommy and daddy were right. They weren't lying to me. My friends' parents were lying to them. What else are my friends' parents lying to them about? So, I mean, the best solution to that is always not to ignore it, my sister said, but to deal with it and to explain. So when they walk in the malls or they walk in these certain places and they see the things in the books, that explain to them what it's all about and what thus saith Yah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Also, you know, it's this whole time of the year is surrounded by, you know, fear in the ghost and the goblins and, you know, so for the scariness and, you know, all that kind of thing. But, you know, here in Isaiah 8 verse 13, it says, sanctify Yahweh of hosts himself and let him be your fear and let him be your dread. Because Yahweh's ways are righteous ways, and we are to be a righteous people, and that's what we not only have to tell our children, but we have to exemplify that. They have to see us putting our fear in the Creator so that we can do the right things, and that's a continuous thing. Like I said, you know, earlier, we have to do that every day on a day-to-day basis.
And you also, I'm sorry.
Go on, sister.
And also, in reading the scriptures, if in going through them, you'll notice different variant ways that Yahweh Yahweh has spoken to us about these things that are evil. He speaks on familiar spirits. He speaks on observers of times. He speaks on those who use enchantments, wizards, those who have caused their sons to pass through the fire, and certain images, building up images, and also mediums. And to know and to realize that these things are all dealing with the same issues, the same things that are revolved around the Halloween and all these other pagan rituals. Halloween is just a lot easier to see. I mean, it should be easy to most everyone to see, but some of the other pagan customs are not as easy to see. You have to look a little deeper. It doesn't negate the fact that they are pagan. They still are. But certainly, if anyone is willing to open their eyes and to open their ears, Halloween is certainly the very first one that they would want to step back from and kind of view and see what it's all about. And then from that point, maybe they can look into these other pagan rituals and to maybe step back from those.
So the question is Halloween a trick or is it a treat? You have to ask yourself about that.
Absolutely a trick.
So, with your children and going to school on that particular day, do you keep your children home, or do you like let the teachers know that they can't participate, and how do y'all handle that?
Well, definitely. I mean, I think some households might be different, and one way to just totally keep them away from it is to keep them at home. But also, too, you know, there's another option in educating your children about these particular things. You can go, in fact, my daughter had a conversation with one of her friends the other day about this very thing, and she was able to communicate with thus saith the Lord, you know, and the other little girl was like, really, you know, right, so I don't have to be scared, you know, things of that nature. So it's also an opportunity for them, you know, to share information as well. So, you know, and then you do let the teachers know, and some teachers don't pay that any attention, you know, any attention, but you do have to be firm in that this is our belief, you know, and make sure that they don't try to force anything on your children.
So, so what it is that you have to communicate to your children what thus says the Lord, and let them know what is righteousness is what is unrighteousness. Well, thank you, viewers, for tuning in to the Signs of the Time tonight. Hopefully, we've educated you on the Halloween trick or treat, and hopefully you'll be able to join us next week.